Hello and welcome. There he is. I was just going to say it's Thursday. It's 5 o'clock, so we're starting another law marketing. Unfortunately, Charlotte and Rich can't join us today. Simon disappeared briefly before we started, so I better bring him back in. Oh, you didn't think I was going to bring you back in, did you? I thought, well, shall I leave him out for a little bit? We might get some chat again. Anyway, it's good to see you both. Back for another week.
Yeah.
How are you both? Would you like to? Let's start with some brief introductions. Kat, you're joining us on a more regular basis after being a guest twice.
Yeah, for my sins.
Congratulations. Would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, so I'm Cat Collier. I head up Flare Insight, and we are a marketing research agency focused on law firms and accountancy firms. So that's me.
Great. Thank you very much. And of course, Simon. Could we stop you saying a few words? That's the question. Probably not. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I once did a sponsored silence for 24 hours, you know. It raised an absolute
I don't believe it.
No, I did. It raised a fortune as well, 700 quid, I think. Hi, I'm Simon Marshall. I'm from TBD Marketing. As you can see from the name down below, I founded the Digital 100, which is an assessment of the top 100 UK law firms, digital marketing, how well they're doing. Take a look on LinkedIn. That's quite fun. And then I work as a virtual CMO for some of the smaller firms out there, and tend to be the kind of firms that are going to really drive on over the next 3 or 4 years as well. And they come to me to kind of help them grow. So yeah, lovely to be with you today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And I'm David Sayce. I'm a digital marketing consultant. I work across a number of areas, including professional services, looking at often the digital, the website, migrations, SEO, audits, and all the really fun stuff that goes into digital marketing. So just a thought, if anyone wants to pay money for any of us to be quiet for a while, a sponsored silence during the show, we'll find a payment mechanism through the webinar, and you can pay for us to be quiet.
There's this genius woman I came across in a one of the, you know, you do those like 5-day campaign masterclass groups, and this is flipping genius, right? She ran a writing club, and it was online in Zoom. I'll put her name in the thing later on because it's just a stroke of genius. And she got people to pay her to be part of her writing club. They just sat in silence for 2 hours on Zoom writing. And these people had these massively I've joined them for one session as well. And I just thought that is very clever. She's basically sat there doing her own writing, being paid by other people to sit and watch them write. Genius.
That's fabulous. I like it.
That is monetizing. I mean,
yeah,
it's amazing. David's gone mute on us there as well. I think
you're right, David.
Let's see, has my mic come back on?
Yeah, you're back now.
With me one moment.
Oh, he's disappeared, Kat.
Do you want to set out the agenda?
Yeah, I think I will do. So today, thanks for joining us today. And if you'd like to ask any questions, then feel free to do so in the comment section, whatever you're watching through YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever it might be, Facebook Live. Today, we're going to talk about budgeting, the pains, the aches, the kind of issues that go with it as well, but the whole of the process as well, and really starting to look ahead to the next financial year. Now, lots of firms have been looking at their budgets already, but I think there's a lot of conversations that are going to be had around those budgets for the year ahead. So the three of us today are going to cover budgets from different angles. I don't know, Kat, you've worked at a couple of different law firms. I don't know how many law firms you worked at. Is it 2 or 3?
3 and an accountancy firm.
Right. Okay. And well, I assume that accountancy, the budgets start relatively early as well. But my sense is that the budgeting process seems to start at law firms earlier every year. I don't know when's the earliest that you ever started in the year, do you think, to do your budgets?
January, but there's always when there's any kind of recession or anything going on externally, then revisions in November as well. So the half year.
Okay, David, when's the earliest you ever started your budgeting process when you worked at a law firm?
Yeah, well, with law firms, it's never been ahead of the game. It's unfortunately, more often than not, it's often been a last minute rush.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm amazed at this.
Yeah.
I've literally, I'm surprised at Cat's answer as well. The earliest I've ever started, I think, was like August time. You're only like about 4 months into the financial year, and you're starting to plan what's happening for the year ahead. Yeah,
it depends on the firm, I suppose. So,
well, definitely. I think so. A couple of things. I think you're right, and I think we're going to really see it this year, which is why a lot of people are going to be watching this video and thinking, well, why are we talking about budgets? Budgets are pretty much set, or we're doing that for May. Well, firstly, that's not the case at every law firm, as David's already said. Some things happen, on that kind of ad hoc basis. So we're going to explore that a bit. But I do think that the 6-month review, Cat, is going to be huge this year for a lot of firms. And I think that trying to get things into the budget is going to be important. Trying to keep things in the budget is going to be important, and trying to actually expand the budget in some areas, as we know what the new world is going to look like, is going to be a conversation to have as well. So we're going to cover a bit of that.
It's interesting as well, because I know with some of the firms I've worked with, the financial year has varied greatly. One firm ran from September, another one in line with January. So there's that as well.
Yeah, you assume it's going to be April end, but actually it depends on the firm. So,
well, most US firms would be Jan 1st would be the new financial year,
and accountancy firms are the same. So.
Accountancy firms, I thought they tended to be. They're not September. They do their year end like 6 months on from everyone else does this, so they can do their own accounting. But yeah, I don't know. They seem to be different anyway. So okay, not a good idea to assume that we know when that budget period is, but a good idea to assume that you need to be on top of your budget, managing it as well. So. Kat, in terms of like what you're thinking about, like the thought leadership side of things, research, using external consultants, that kind of thing. Tell me about that process. Tell me about your thoughts from when you've been in-house and doing budgeting for it, and then we'll come to your thoughts on when you've been someone who's on the other side of it, as it were.
On the other side of it. So in terms of research when in-house, the massive expense doesn't actually come from marketing, because it's subscriptions, and that tends to be held by the library team, and it's protected because your average LexisNexis is needed for lawyers to be able to get on with their work. So from our side, the kind of news element of it was always protected. And the teams themselves were always quite embedded strategically as well. So they would feed into business planning, the day-to-day client research, all that kind of stuff. So they didn't tend, in terms of staffing, they didn't tend to get cut. What I found from running the agency is marketing teams kind of paused from COVID onwards. I think their budgets were already potentially signed off, or they were kind of sketchily seeing what would happen. Budgets were revised in November last year, but then we've seen people have been coming to us a bit more now, because they realised that they need to actually see what's going to happen in the next year. So it hasn't particularly stalled. It did in kind of from March last year until June, but I think firms are realising that they need to kind of work out what's going on in their markets to be able to plan what they're doing with their own budgets. So it's definitely risen in importance, I've seen. So.
But in terms of the kind of campaigns that you might work on for people as well, or the kind of work that you do for people, how can you give us an idea of if they're trying to get it, let's say we'll go with the May 1st, I know it's not, but let's say it's May 1st kind of timeline for a new budget to start. When should people be having their conversations with you to allow that it goes into their budget for that year?
From any time, really. I would say from January, February is a good time to start having that conversation, because it gives the partners enough lead time to start thinking about their own needs, and they can then propose it to the board if they need to have that sign off as well. But yeah, as early as possible, really.
Okay, that's good. And did you find that were there any difference in kind of challenging years or boom years as to whether or not the budget's got hacked around or whatever? Is there any differences, or is it just the same every year, or how does that work?
Do you know, it's interesting, having worked in an accountancy firm. I was at Baker Tilly when the credit crunch happened, and they immediately were on it. And I've seen it this time around from ex-colleagues who were at the Big Four consultancies as well. They were just on it. I think people were working 60% of their hours for a certain amount of their salary, etc. They were just really managing it really well. With law firms, you obviously have some service lines that dive potentially, like M&A last year, but actually your dispute resolution increases. So I can't say that law firms have such a crash in income as accountancy firms may do. So I haven't seen anything yet to say that budgets are decreasing drastically, but you may have seen something different. So
no, I was just wondering about that experience of, in those other years as well, just thinking back to when I was, I've been at 6 different law firms as well, and it didn't seem to matter what year you were in, even if it was a good year, at the 6-month kind of point, you'd seem to have some revision on budgets, or some need to kind of, curtail activities, as it were, as well. Maybe it's the firms that I worked at, but yeah, it just
I've seen people kind of spend budgets because they have budgets, but
that's often the way. There's often that mad rush towards the end, isn't there, to make sure everything's spent, to make sure they get it the next year, which
suddenly there's a flat screen TV that's appeared somewhere, and all that kind of stuff.
It's like roadworks in March, isn't it?
Yeah,
exactly.
You can imagine that can't have been happening as much in the last year, where people have been thinking more strategically about where they need to invest, and obviously tech and digital and all that's going to be a massive investment. So
that's what I've been seeing. I think from the end of last year, and especially with probably more on the financial services side, it's actually some big names looking at their digital marketing, their digital stack, and trying to get a sense of, is this right? And it's interesting, because quite often what I've been seeing going in there is, they've got a good looking front end, but they're missing out maybe with the SEO side, the technology behind the website, that wider integration within the firm. But yeah, seeing some companies put forward some pretty big projects from a migration and integration point of view.
I was going to ask that. Have you, and specifically, David, have you seen some of those major projects being brought forward or being pushed back, or what's happening?
I think, there's a couple of firms I've spoken with where they were ideas for the future. They'd never quite got round to it. And I think with everything that happened last year, the beginning of this year especially, I saw 2 or 3 firms really looking at, okay, what are we going to be doing? Interestingly, these were firms that had marketing departments, but didn't necessarily have dedicated digital resource. So they could do some of the content, some of the wider marketing, but when it came to social websites, some of the content for online, they were really struggling, and even more so when it came to the wider integration within the business.
And sorry, when you mentioned there's a couple of people there, you were thinking more in the broader FS sector?
These were specifically within the FS area. There's been a few within legal I've had some chats with, and again, it's been the concerns from last year. I think it's what we saw last year was everything went online. And I think people started looking more at websites, looking at how they're interacting from a digital point of view. And so it's brought the thinking forward. But with some, they didn't realize how far behind they were, which is interesting.
Kat, you look like you were going to ask something there.
I was just listening to a 2-year-old in the background, which put me off. That's why I went on mute. I was just wondering if firms were actually set up for the whole webinar experience this time last year, or if some of them had to struggle to deploy stuff. Or
That's a good question. That's such a good question. Yeah. Can I just make a quick observation before David does on the technical front, because mine's going to be a slightly different one, which is I know of quite a few events teams that were basically furloughed immediately, right?
Yeah.
And yet, where Midge is, they just pivoted immediately. Just went straight into a digital world, and they were ready. And look, even if they didn't have the systems in place, they quickly got everything there as well. So David can talk to that. But that idea that some people thought, well, we won't be doing any events, and then just shut it off, I just was astounding to me that as if somehow, they were a nice to have rather than remaining front of mind with clients wasn't going to be something you need to do during that period. So it's a very odd decision. And I'm not just talking about like one firm, but like a lot of firms did that. And it's baffling, really. David, go on. Technologically, I don't know. It might be a different answer.
No, I think it's very similar. It's interesting. There's a number of firms who have their webinar, their online video has often been a convoluted setup, and they've had to pivot very quickly. I mean, as we've seen, I mean, here we use a software called StreamYard. We can get up and running in a matter of minutes. We can stream out to channels, record it. Great functionality. I'll drop a referral link somewhere behind. But it just goes to show how easy it is actually to set up. The sign-off process may be something else. But I know from, a lot of the firms I've worked with, setting up that webinar integration within the firm has often been a part of it. And often using systems such as Citrix and On24, the really big players, has been a big project, but you can get on very simply.
I mean, there are some really nice things about those systems like On24 as well, but I do feel a little bit for those firms who were ahead of the curve with going to do more UGC in video last year and had paid for in-house studios that didn't have them before, and then suddenly found actually what they needed was to have, as David keeps telling me, an influencer's light ring, a nice microphone, and a kind of a green screen at home, as it were, instead. And I think that I do feel for them a bit. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because we talk about budgets, and that's a really good example. I think a lot of that stuff that would have gone into events, a while ago, and the face-to-face stuff was quite easy to pivot into the digital stuff. I'm really interested to see what happens as of mid-June in the UK, given the dates that we're facing and how people have budgeted for that for next year, because this is infinitesimally small cost to run something like this versus running something face-to-face, and there's a place for both of them in the real world. But how a CMO has budgeted for those things to happen in various different areas for the next year,
and creating a hybrid as well, because there's going to be people who aren't comfortable going yet, but then making those face-to-face connections are massively useful. So it'd be interesting to see how that works. But
I've got a little view on that, which is so look, if you're gonna do the hybrid, don't, right? Okay, and I know it's a strong view, but look, run your session, record the session. David can edit these things, and we can all look amazing afterwards. The version you see later on, we'll have this rubbish in it, right?
I struggle making some people look amazing.
We could. I think if you're going to do those sessions, that lawyers should rehearse it and record the thing as well, right? It's a good practice anyway. Get that data, and you'll absolutely have it nailed for the live event then as well, next day or later that day or whatever it might be. But I really would suggest that people don't try and do the two things. It's like doing, what they say, you can't do two things at once. You'll just do two things badly rather than one thing properly. To talk to a room and try and convey those energy levels that you need to down the barrel of a camera that's sat at the back of the room, even if it's a well set up and well appointed place, I just don't think it works in the same way as doing something like this, where you can get it to work and then live, and your voice needs to go up and you need to move around and do all the things you've got to do there. So
I just an analogy to that is and it's a completely separate thing, but I was just thinking about the whole homeschooling thing, how I heard about a friend whose child wasn't getting web teaching. They were just getting a camera as the teacher taught the key stage kids, and I was horrified by that. But that is a direct analogy to what you were saying, that actually that kind of doesn't work. So just having somebody teaching to a group of people, and then there's your child in the background somewhere else trying to work out what's going on, and that will be the same thing with the kind of webinar hybrid that I was talking about. So
I think it'd be like, it'd almost be like being dropped into, somewhere in Asia and like asking me to fend for myself in a language that I've never heard of. It is possible to get by, but it's not necessarily the experience that we signed up.
Yeah, I get you. Yeah,
hard in a way, and you remain that kind of outsider. I don't think that's what we should be doing. And now, look, I do think that firms should have budgeted for events for the year ahead, because why not just delete those events later on if it needs to be, if people don't feel comfortable, if you're not getting the numbers? And secondly, You know, social distancing has set us up that people don't want to hang around in such big numbers. Well,
Yeah.
except if you're a teenager here on the Downs in Bristol, apparently. And I think that is very good for law firms because the smaller group things, the 8s, the 10s, the 12s, you know, the 2 pizza rule things, my view is that's where a lot of business comes from. It's from that smaller, slightly more intimate, everyone's got a voice opportunity. I don't know. Yeah, what do you think?
From a CRM perspective, that's probably better, isn't it? Because you can capture people's thoughts more, and you can engage them better as well, because they can actually have a conversation rather than being talked at. So
it's interesting. I mean, we've seen some fabulous software come up recently. One of the ones I've been involved in, Hopin, has come along at just such a great time, and it's trying to bridge that gap of the big seminar with the smaller breakout rooms. And it, in some ways, it does actually a pretty good job online of replicating those big 1, 2, 3 day events where you have a keynote stage and smaller breakaway rooms. And that's been interesting to see. And I've been involved with a few of those, and some of those were originally in real life events, and they quickly shifted online. And it's interesting what's going to happen now, how much is actually going to go back to fully in real life and what's going to remain online. I think this has been a fabulous opportunity for, and especially I think for law firms, to become more accessible through webinars, through that user generated content side of the online.
those 2-day events that have gone online, has the take up been good? Because I've just looked at them and wondered, do they have as much of a take up as if they were physical? So
it's mixed. I mean, some of them have been specific to SEO, digital marketing, where pretty much everyone is getting together to watch a few events and then go for a beer. The virtual beer is still a big issue. We haven't worked that out yet. So yeah, it's interesting, but I think there's still being
law firms that are doing it. So I've had a debate with people within law firms whether it's worth doing that or not, because they gain the profile.
I'd always say, there's the live element and then the recording element, and you look at it from, okay, yes, we might be down, I don't know, 40, 60% on the day for the event. But I mean, as Simon said, you do some editing, you release those videos over time. It gives you a huge amount of content to play with, and you'll find that that's going to help drive traffic in, get people talking over the following month or two.
Yeah, I mean, I think my answer to that is not something I've read about. I saw this amazing insurance event that a really good editor runs on an annual basis, and she brought together the same crowd as previously. They all sat there for 2 days, but I think that you can't lose sight of how good the content needs to be. I mean, I think you need David's natural, StreamYard excellence, that kind of. I'm not even joking. David's after last week's call, I went onto the StreamYard event about StreamYard, and it was very, very, very good, as you'd expect. And I went onto LinkedIn one a couple of weeks ago as well, and that had who's the woman behind Bridgerton, the brilliant producer. She was on there as well talking. I've forgotten her name off the top of my head. And just when you've got people like that turning out, it's just about content, great content, and people will, show up and.
And it's interesting you mentioned, I mean, the StreamYard event, it just goes to show how much information is out there and available. If you're a small firm and you're looking to get started with something like that, there's a huge amount of help out there. There's a huge amount of videos you can watch and really help you get started.
That probably takes us back towards the budgeting thing, which is what we're supposed to be talking about. But that idea, I think, of being buddies and going along to some of those events together is something that I encourage lawyers all the time, right? You've got people who you want to get to know better who are in-house. They might be targets of yours. They might even be new relationship managers as well. And I just say to people, look, everyone's worst fear is turning up to something like that alone. So just say to your mate, should we go to this thing together? and then you go along, and there's no reason why you can't do that online, and there's no reason why you can't do that at a price that makes a load of sense as well, you know, for you and your buddy as well. So when you're thinking about budgets for the year ahead, or whether or not that's something you're thinking about at the moment, or you're going to have to work on them later on, I think there's a lot of repurposing going on, right? People need to be looking at what was the objective they were trying to achieve underneath it. If they didn't have one, then don't do it. I really mean that. I mean, just strike through anything that you don't need to do anymore and don't do it anymore, right? And then, you know, let's start thinking about, okay, well, what can I do that meets those objectives anyway, as they used to be? And you know that I'm a massive convert for live events and doing those things. I think that if people think business comes from them, it's going to go well, then you should budget for them and still do it. I mean, you can't tell me that somebody who wants to go to Wimbledon this year isn't going to be absolutely gagging to go and watch the tennis at the end of the, you know, in the summer. I know it's not happening at Wimbledon, but that kind of thing is going to happen. Yeah. So I think that you've got to budget accordingly. But if you can't, I think you need a fallback plan, right?
One thing that's interesting is I don't know. I mean, I've the last 12, 18 months, I've done a lot of online webinars, both sides of the screen. And it's interesting. One thing is the paid versus the free. Have you attended in the last 12 months any paid for online events? Or perhaps would you?
If it was something if it's something I don't actually want to go to, but I know I should, and I pay for it, I turn up. But there's enough free stuff out there that it hasn't been marketed at me, to be honest. But that's a good point. Whether it can be monetized within law firms, I don't know. I doubt it.
There's a lot going on with that question, and I think there's about 3 or 4 questions really in it. Like, it's one, like, what's your predilection, what's your predisposition, and then 2, you know, how do you make content good enough that it's worth, you know, paying for nowadays? And I was just thinking, the answer to your question in terms of an event for me is 0. I haven't, but the answer in terms of online training is actually yes. I have definitely done it, actually within one of my chosen areas as well, because I figure, you know, that's what's going to turn me from hopefully great into the next level above. And I've invested in something the other day, and I felt really good about doing it. It's the right thing to do. But it's about that, you know, content leap, isn't it? It's going to move us up to that next level, and I think that's definitely in there. But yeah, I think it's as I mentioned on one of the previous calls, the Divorce Club in Bristol that I mentioned as well uses that payment figure, one, to secure the speaker that they've got running that Divorce Club session, but 2, I think it's also a bit of a signal about how serious you are about the subject matter. I don't think there's any harm in saying, "I'll turn up." You know, Kat, do you turn up to things that you pay for? You know, and would you turn up if they were free? You know, and in a way, I think it sorts out a lot of things for you, doesn't it? If you make people I mean, even if you just say make a charitable payment, you know, law firms really don't need the 15 quid. What they want is the signal that you're willing to commit to coming to that session.
Yeah,
and I think that can be very important. You know, I think for the right type of events, the right type of information, people will pay, and whether it's as you say, a nominal fee that goes to charity, I think that's definitely something worth exploring. I mean, the kiss of death to most webinars always used to be when people said, are there recordings for this available afterwards? And as soon as they heard yes, you could just see the live viewing figures drop.
Yeah. So one thing along those lines, and it's back to the budgeting point again, is Mitchell Moore's down this way they run this really successful set of property awards, and it's live, and they run it in the Exeter Chiefs kind of stadium there, and they've run it for so many years and they've done it so well. They actually take sponsors, and I have a feeling, although I don't know because they haven't told me, that it's almost self-funding, if not self-funding, and that is, I think, pretty clever to have a net, you know, a cost 0 awards thing, your brand all over it. It's got your coverage absolutely everywhere. All of your clients come to, and then somehow you're not having to pay for it. I mean, they've pulled an absolute blinder by getting that.
So they own the whole thing rather than
own the whole thing. It's their event.
Wow.
right? So
Yeah.
Midterm Property Awards. Take a look at their website afterwards, right? And I've been to it, and you know, I don't know if I had to pay for a table. I must have done. And and they've got sponsors for each of the awards, because those. Why does it have to be a magazine? Why does it have to be someone else? I think that in the years ahead for CMOs, I think we should be thinking about some of that stuff. So actually, Siri's got an opinion. Here's what I found, says Siri. I think we need more of that, like that inventive.
Do you know what I have seen?
And flow one way. It could be something.
Yeah, I've seen, and I'm sure you will have both seen this as well, but internal awards that I'm starting to see emerge on LinkedIn. So, you know, somebody's got the HR award within a law firm. So I can see there's internal stuff happening, but that's the first time I've heard of a law firm creating their own awards that are external. So
We did it on the PR team at Dewey, where I know that we didn't do enough of it, otherwise we would save the firm. But I think Jay and a couple of us build over $1 million, maybe $1.5 million a year on PR support to clients.
Yeah,
within the in-house team, you know, and I just think that firms they're always adding on consultancies, things here and there, but I do think that they've got a lot of really good human capital in the teams. I mean, David, you know, when you're in-house and acting on those digital marketing programs as well, you know a lot of stuff that other clients then look at and go, you know, we'd love to help, you know, can you help us with this thing? You can do some consulting for them.
Yeah,
I think that the budgeting process could draw some of that out for, you know, how we might actually put money back into the pot as well and self-fund, as it were. We've done it on social media policies. You know, if you work at a law firm, guess what? You've got a social media policy, and that team knows quite a lot about it on the comms team there, and they were able to educate and help clients, and some pretty significant clients in the past, and charge people money for that kind of piece of work. There's no reason that you can't.
Yeah, that happens with research as well. I catch clients who their own clients have been sent on the research that we've produced. So, but yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's surprising that those you would think that those big names would have that kind of information to their own hand, but they don't a lot of the time. So,
no, well, I suppose it's just having the time to think about it as well. So, David, did we cover that point about bringing it forward what you've seen from FS? But if you were in-house at the moment and you had, let's say you still were, and you'd had that kind of major web project, or, you know, the early idea that you were going to run it in 21, 22, what's your gut instinct about that at the moment? Is it something you'd press on with?
I think so. I think, you know, you really need to understand where the business is at the moment. But I think from everything I see, I mean, we're seeing some good stuff on law firms with the marketing side and the digital side too, but they're still a way behind. And I think now more than ever is the time to really push forward. And it's actually with other changes happening over this year, it's a good time to take stock of what's going on.
Kat, what about if you had a major kind of thought leadership campaign, you were still in-house as well? Is it something that you'd feel comfortable commending managing partners to do at the moment? You know, if you've got a 70 grand full media kind of campaign research.
Yeah, I watched a webinar a couple of weeks ago. It was free. With they had a guest who managed the PwC CEO survey, and he was really interesting, talking about how, well, this is an observance that anybody can make, but those white papers are going to be most looked at in a recession because people don't know what's going on. And he made the point that they do those PwC surveys and they cut them across, I don't know how many sectors, but 10, 15 sectors. Each person that goes in there to look at the sectors downloads an average of 7 different sectoral white papers. And the amount of engagement that they get from that. So what I've been encouraging with law firms is, if they have a survey, or if they have a campaign subject, which, say, let's net zero or something like that, can they cascade that down to each of their audiences so that they can make it much more targeted? So you may even have less of a budget, but can you use it more wisely and gain greater traction from it as well? So yeah, that's definitely one that I would talk about. So You may have
you'd be comfortable recommending the larger kind of project as long as it was designed in a way that was going to benefit larger sections of the business.
Yeah, and like we were saying last week, it doesn't have to be those mega projects. Not everybody's a PwC who has £1 million or whatever it is to create that survey every year. But if you can use that budget across sectors or across your target audiences, then you're going to get more traction than just focusing it on a broader. If we talk about digital transformation in terms of clients and how they are adapting to that, loads of law firms are talking about that, but how can you make it more distinct than that? Or
yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I'm seeing a real impact of that process at the moment, and I think it's down to skills. You know, a lot of firms are asking me at the moment about how do we, you know, upskill those people. So, I mean, marketing teams are asking me to improve their understanding about how to do analytics, or not do them, but actually read them and interpret them and make decisions about, you know, what they're doing in the business. And then I think I've got some, you know, chunky things out there at the moment as well for training some pretty decent firms on LinkedIn as well. You know, and it's really interesting that, you know, that's an area in which I think everyone should be upskilling, and then they should be using that knowledge within the marketing and BD teams to educate the rest of the business as well, and not just assuming that everyone's going to know how to do it, because I mean, you know, I compile enough of that stuff to know. So if I were to make a play for any budget to be retained at the moment, I mean, PR, you know, I love it if we can do that, and it's great, and it's really worthwhile, and you can get great bangs for your buck from using the right people. But I think on the social side of things, I would make a play that people should leave in that budget as well, because I think it's what marketing and BD do and a managing partner can do is give permission to a lot of other people to do the right things on social media. And if marketing people keep asking lawyers to do it but don't do it themselves, then I think it falls flat on a regular basis. So if you've got something that Cat's done and some, you know, research, even if it's a departmental level, but you get the whole of the department to share it, or segments of it, or, you know, quotes from it and that, I mean, I just think you will get wall-to-wall kind of eyeball time with it, as it were, and that's got to be worth doing. So I would encourage people to keep their budget.
I think if ever there was a time to upskill with the likes of LinkedIn, it's now. I mean, I'm still hearing a lot about that. Questions from content teams about writing for the web. You know, people are keen to understand more, and I think, you know, it's a great way. Sorry, you know who's joined. It's you know, a fabulous investment for any business to just take that marketing team and think, well, you know, where can we make these nudges? Where can we make sometimes even these small improvements? And as you said, I mean, the analytics side, just learning and understanding what all that stuff in GA, GSC, what it actually means, is so valuable in the long run.
Silly stat silly. See the stat that we released yesterday, where we just worked out what the length of tenure was at all the top 100 firms, and we just told all those firms something they don't even know about their own businesses, like how long. So we've gone onto LinkedIn and we worked out, because it says average length of tenure, and then today we did a post about total time that people saw that as well. Now the reason I mention it is because there is nothing needed in your budget for that. You can do that work yourself. Kat, you know, the in-house research teams love doing a new little project like that. It's not the same as other stuff they've done. You and I, we used to have some lovely conversations. We would always be up to something. You're always trying to find a new angle, find something different to say. And, you know, Kat gets asked to do the kind of same client style meeting research on a regular basis. So if I came to her and said, please can you do this piece of research instead, your eyes kind of lit up a bit and we'd do something interesting together. And I think that firm can, in your budgeting, I do think allowing a bit of time and saying to people, look, you know, if we train people how to do some analytics skills, how to do some LinkedIn skills, how to do some budgeting skills, I'm not even joking, then I think that it will pay dividends later on in terms of, you know, the amount of marketing efforts that you can do within the team.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools in the box with law firms, but are they being fully utilized? So, so for example, law firms that roll out HubSpot, are they actually using that analytical capability to work out how well that they can target their audiences? It's often they're kind of rolled out by one team, and then another team aren't actually, it's not joined up between those two teams. So that's what I've seen from in-house and externally as well. So there's things that are already budgeted for and will be paid for, but they could be used better. So
I think that's a huge break, as you were saying with LexisNexis. I don't think I ever really got as much use out of it as I could have done. I was working in the PR team and that sort of things, and I thought if I'd have spent a bit more time understanding what was available, then we probably wouldn't use some of the other systems that we did. And that's not a small cost.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But I meant more on our side, in terms of the systems that we would pay for. That's a relative duplication of effort, whereas you could just go and use something that the library's already paid for and budget something different instead. And I think that, I was looking at our systems for TBD the other day, just looking at the things we subscribe to on a monthly basis. I can't tell you the figure, but it was frightening, the amount of money that we burn each month on that. We need to for a lot of the things that we do, and that's absolutely fine. But it is, at least it's good to have a list and an understanding of what's in the budget and why you're using it. And some of those systems have got to be retired. They're just not, there's not enough use of them to kind of do it, as it were. Yeah. If you had to, Kat, if you had to have one thing that remained in the budget, like at all costs, what's the hill you're going to die on? What's the thing that you're going to say, you will not take away my X? What is it?
Ooh. Even from a research perspective, Sales Navigator is the one that I'd probably keep.
Amazing.
Even more than a new subscription, because it's a pain in the bum, but there are free things out there that are similar to the new subscriptions. So because there's just so much content there that you can creating sales lists, analyzing competitors, all that kind of side of it. So
the other thing about it is, I think and with respect to my past as a PR as well, if you're going to choose, it has to be the stuff that's going to make the money at the end of the day, doesn't it? Sales Navigator does tell you competitor intelligence, what other people are talking about, what they're doing, and you can curate your own feed. I think that's a very good call. David, apart from SEMrush, what would yours be?
I don't know. I mean, it really depends.
Who's willing to give you a giveaway?
I'm not going to comment. There's various softwares out there that a marketing team can use to help with digital.
Right.
Others are available, but it does come back to being able to use them, having the training, having the dedication to get to use them. And it's actually, it's the same with Sales Navigator. I've been working with firms where, they've got it, but can they use it? Those are often two very different things. And it comes back to, as you say, about pruning your own budget. Have a look at what you've got. Are you using it effectively? If not, then either skill up or drop it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking through those systems that I've got, which would be the thing that I would, what would be the last one that I would kind of cull, as it were. And I find it really hard. It's quite confronting, the idea of that. I suppose I'm not including, WordPress or things like that, because I think they're just, they're kind of, you almost can't do without them, as it were. But, I'm stuck a bit between, maybe the kind of media database side of things for obvious reasons. And then I'm trying to think what else gives us an edge. I mean, I know it sounds really silly, it's really basic, but the Google Cloud Computing stuff as well, the processing that we do on my BigQuery stuff, on the processing that we've got. One of the things we're thinking about the Digital 100 is opening it up a bit over the next few weeks. That thing better be built on BigQuery, because if people are hitting that for data all the time, one, the costs will go up, and two, it needs to be able to manage it as well. So, it's really interesting, but it's a good exercise, good thought exercise to realize the order in which, and I think at the 6 month point, Kat, some firms are going to be going the wrong way. I think they'll have, they won't have, if we if we're right in predicting the way the market might go in 6 months' time, there might well be a bit of restriction in terms of the spend that's going on there. I would suggest, right? I don't know, but proven to be the case over the last year. I got that right, but let's say it was, and some firms won't. Some firms will do brilliant, some won't. But having that idea in your head as a marketer as to, okay, if we peeled it back and peeled it back and peeled it back as to which things you trade at that point in time, I think is a very handy thing.
A tip I would give is, if whatever subscription or technology that you're onboarding, look at the clauses for when you want to cancel it. The worst I've seen is signing up to a subscription and they said that you had to give 12 months notice to cancel. So, but that would roll every year. So every year you had to be on it. So yeah, because if a huge crash happens and you're committed for another 11 and a half months to some subscription that you don't need, or technology, whatever it is, then you're a bit screwed at the half year point, aren't you? Because you're committed. So
I think that's such a good point. So Kim, who's one of the greatest salespeople I've ever known, she was at On24 and she's moved recently. I think she might have gone to Vimeo or something like that as well. She, at that point in time, she provided a media monitoring service. I was working at this firm and we were looking at a competitor of hers. I learned a lot from her about post decision sales, right? So we had decided to go with someone else. She was she never showed her frustration and she never got upset about it, but every few days she would check in just to see how it's going with that onboarding process. And the moment at which I'd had enough of negotiating with these other people over exactly the point that Kat has just said, a rolling 12-month forever contract, and the costs were just far too high for what could justify it, I kid you not, there was no wedge between the time in which she found out that I wasn't going to go with the contract and the time in which she delivered a new contract to me to sign. And that day we'd signed and we were on board the next day. And that, I mean, if you want to know what sales looks like.
Was that Kim Dorsley?
Yeah, Donkersley. Yeah. What a phenomenal saleswoman as well. I learned a lot from her as well, just from observation as well. And such a charming person. If you get a chance to link with her on LinkedIn, anyone watching this video, please do so. You won't be wasting your time. She gives value all the time to people. She's absolutely amazing. So, yeah. Okay. So tips are, get ready. Don't assume that budgets are done and dusted. I think is really one of those things. I would really be thinking about repurposing, and you've probably already done that, but I wouldn't even assume that is a done deal, right? How are we going to go about events? How are we going to go about online versus whatever? How are we repurposing? Things are going to be more fluid. And as Kat says, I'd look out for those terms. But people are more open, Kat, I think, to being flexible about those terms than they've been in a long time as well. They might not like it, right? But, compared to walking over to their competitor, they'll happily work on a more flexible basis with you than they were previously as well. If they're not willing to negotiate on that, it's with the greatest respect, it's probably not the right person for this time as well. I think you've got the 6-month break coming up at some point. I think you are going to be asked the question by managing partner, the CMO, what we're doing, how much do we need to spend, and I think someone has asked me this week to help them kind of look at how they're going to defend their position robustly in relation to what they've decided to do. And this is a big shout out for those people who are in a counter-cyclical practice. If you're in insolvency, if you're in employment law, if you're in litigation, if you're in one of those areas at the moment as well, I'm not saying you're not busy the rest of the time, but now is your time to, I think, really nail down those messages and make sure everybody understands, no, wait a minute, we're the ones who are going to drive this for the next wee while. We're the ones that are going to be bringing, super profits in comparison. And therefore, you might decide to cut marketing budget over here, but ours should substantially go up as a percentage of the overall as a result of the fact that we're more likely to bring that business in at the moment as well. And I think it's a mistake to slash those areas entirely. I didn't know if I've got any other observations, David, really. There's nothing else that's front of my mind immediately.
I'd just say for any marketing department, review where you're spending the money, look at what the return is. In the past, it's always worth getting in touch with companies if there's any doubt. Sometimes you can get a deal ahead of time. Yeah. I think make sure you're getting the value for what you're using.
Yeah, I think I would also play the game as if you are a freelancer and suggest whether or not you were going to spend your own money on it. Because if you are able to put yourself and empathise with that position for a minute and think, well, look, you know, this might be £70,000 and the law firm is paying for this, but a wise man once said to me, everything that's paid for at a law firm is paid for by the client, everything, right? And if you think about things in those terms, then suddenly it's like the clients are paying for this thing. It better be the best thing that we're doing. And I think that's quite a helpful way to kind of get through that as well. Kat, any last tips for us?
Oh, in terms of what?
Or 2-year-olds, whichever, doesn't really matter.
2-year-olds, feed them at 5 o'clock so that they're not screaming in the background. Yeah, budgets wise, I would say it's driven by what's happening in the macro environment and trying to feed that down. So that's obviously a shout out for research, but it's an obvious one, isn't it, really? And trying to understand, yeah, like you say, which practice groups are going to thrive and which ones that you should have your I mean, tax is another one at the moment. Yes. With Rishi, whatever he's going to come up with, that should be forefront of mind, which potentially wasn't quite as big an issue with the financial crash. So, yeah.
It's very true. David, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I think it's been another fabulous discussion this week. Even though we're down 2 people. I don't know where they've run off to. They're off having a party somewhere, but they will be back next week. And next week is show number 8. We're going to have a little celebration. We're going to get some party balloons because that's our 2-month anniversary. It's exciting. And we've got some interesting topics lined up for next week as well. So more about that. We'll be posting that on LinkedIn over the week. In the meantime, thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much, Kat, our newest member of the show and tell team. And until next week, everyone take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks. Cheers.